All new stories, an audience Q&A, and book signing. Tickets and information at davidsedarisontour.com.
Classical 24 brings listeners beautiful music from around the world, featuring the best of classical music from the all-time greats to the newest composers and performances. Download the WJCT app or visit wjct.org/jacksmusic to start listening today.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, we talk with the head of Visit Jacksonville about the tourist climate on the First Coast. Then, measuring the health of the St. Johns River by documenting its seagrasses. The Riverkeeper joins us to talk about an upcoming river voyage of exploration. And spreading the message of mental health on the streets, literally. We talk to the organizers of Chalk It Up for Life about resources to prevent suicide. Plus, our own Dan Scanlon gives us the latest on JTA's increasingly controversial automated vehicle system. You can join our conversation on air by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org or reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or X. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been granted another chance to appeal extradition to the United States on espionage charges. The High Court in London handed down that decision today. The ruling extends a more than 12-year-long legal battle that pitted U.S. and British authorities against Assange, an Australian national, and advocates of free speech rights. Arrest warrants have been issued for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and leaders of the Palestinian militant group Hamas. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi reports the International Criminal Court has charged them with war crimes and crimes against humanity.
ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan said he had enough evidence that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister were responsible for crimes against humanity, including using starvation as a weapon of war. As for the three top Hamas leaders, including head Yahya Sinwar, they are charged with planning the crimes on October 7th, including the taking of hostages and torture. There was no official comment from the Israeli government, but the War Cabinet's Benny Gantz tweeted that it would be a historical crime to approve the arrest warrants. Israel is not a member of the ICC and does not recognize its jurisdiction in Israel or Gaza. A panel of ICC judges will now look into Khan's application for the arrest warrants. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The prosecution is expected to begin wrapping up its case today in the criminal hush money trial of former President Donald Trump. NPR's Andrea Bernstein reports the prosecution's star witness, former Trump attorney and fixer Michael Cohen, is expected to be back on the witness stand.
The trial's moved rapidly. Witnesses who are allied with Trump or who have worked for Trump and those who are very much opposed to him have given pieces of the puzzle. They've described an alleged conspiracy to interfere with the 2016 election by paying off adult film actor Stormy Daniels and then allegedly falsifying business records to cover it up. Trump has pleaded not guilty, and his defense attorneys have called into question the former president's knowledge of the scheme. Former Trump attorney Michael Cohen is still on the stand. Once he's finished, Trump could testify in his own defense. If he doesn't, the case will move rapidly to summations, jury instructions, and then it's up to the jury to decide. Andrea Bernstein, NPR News, New York.
The process of removing the massive cargo ship that slammed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore is underway this morning. Demolition crews have spent nearly 2 months working to remove the ship from the twisted wreckage of the bridge. Officials say it could take several days to fully remove it. The crash in March left 6 construction workers dead. Investigations into the incident are ongoing. This is NPR News.
It's now 4 minutes after 9. This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. The St. Johns County Commission will discuss the future of the World Golf Village at its next meeting tomorrow. The discussion comes on the heels of the county agreeing to spend $5.5 million to buy another large chunk of the property. The commission will take a look at the results of a survey conducted last year where 5,000 people shared what they would like to see at the property. That commission meeting kicks off at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in the County Administration Building. The federal government is strengthening rules around the fine gray ash that is produced when coal is burned for electricity. Coal ash ponds or landfills shut down from before a certain date must now be monitored for groundwater contamination. Walter L. Smith II with the Sierra Club says these new rules from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency don't go far enough. He wants all coal ash ponds shut down.
I spent a tremendous amount of time working on trying to get coal ash designated specifically as a hazardous waste. It has not happened yet, but that's something that we're working on.
Tampa Electric has one active coal ash pond left at its Big Bend plant in Apollo Beach. Duke Energy has an ash landfill at its Crystal River complex. It is overcast here in Jacksonville, 73 degrees right now, 74 in Orange Park. We'll get to the low 80s, partly sunny today.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, taking the temperature of the tourist climate on the First Coast, including what, if any, impact we've seen from several recent travel advisories. Later in the program, tracking the decline of river grass and a closer look at why JTA's autonomous transportation system may not be so autonomous after all. But first, Florida is both a magnet and a lightning rod these days, and nobody knows that more than the folks who track and encourage tourism. And to discuss that, we're joined by VisitJack's president and CEO, Michael Corrigan. Hey, Michael Corrigan, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. We appreciate it.
So I want to get to some travel numbers in a bit, but let's start with these recent travel advisories. There were 4 separate groups that made public statements about coming to Florida, not being a safe place. Equality Florida, the NAACP, the Florida Immigrant Coalition, and the League of United Latin American Citizens. What impact has that had? Have you seen any impact because of those travel advisories?
Well, anytime you have a travel advisory, it has an impact. And those are state advisories that happen. And obviously, Visit Jacksonville, we monitor anything that happens that's related to tourism in Jacksonville and the state of Florida. And I'm really proud of our team because we started looking at how can we be a better destination long before these travel advisories came out. We created a committee that's constantly working on DEI issues and making sure that visitors that come here are having the experience that they want to have here. It's been incredible because we've learned a tremendous amount from that committee that meets on a regular basis and talks about everything from what the media is saying, but even more importantly, what does a visitor interact? What happens to them when they get here, and how are they able to still have enjoyable time? And we're not seeing a real big impact of those advisories here in Jacksonville because we looked ahead of and said, how do we enhance that experience for visitors?
And so you've not seen cancellations of big events or anything like that?
We've had conversations with especially groups that are coming in about what is the reaction to that? How is the community handling that? If you ask me what is the number one asset that Jacksonville brings to the tourism industry, it's the people. Because when these advisories come out, people call us, the partners that we work with, and says, how are we handling this? How are we addressing this? And we have great communication with them. And then when those groups are getting ready to come in, we're talking to them ahead of time. And many of them are saying, no, we're coming here because you're not changing because of the current news environment.
Mm-hmm. And so are you able to offer any kind of specific reassurances or do you take any steps to make people feel welcome when they do come? or have conversations with venues ahead of time to make that happen?
100%. That's the number one advantage of working with Visit Jacksonville is that we're having those conversations with them. When a group, for instance, a group's coming in town, we're talking to every single aspect of their visit here in our community. If they're using, if it's just at a hotel and they're using the resources there, we're talking to the banquet managers and the general managers and the restaurateurs that are in there. And then we're talking to Downtown Vision, if the event's downtown, about how do you help those visitors move around downtown. And then if they're going off-site from the property, we're then talking to the venues they're talking about using. We're actually presenting the venues to them, giving them a cafeteria list of options, which they then pick of which ones they want. And then we already know those people at those individual places because we work with them on a daily basis.
And so your job, is making sure that people know the story of Jacksonville on the First Coast and, appreciate it, want to come here. Is it difficult to avoid getting dragged into the politics of the state, or are you sort of involved in the politics of the state? I mean, I know that Visit Florida statewide, made some statements after those travel advisories, calling them kind of a stunt and not legitimate.
We don't get involved in them because we don't have to, because we're working on a regular basis and we have allies in each area of the community that are saying, those are reports and those are facts that are coming out, but they're not real people in our community, and we connect with the real people in our community and put them directly in touch with those that have questions about it. For instance, if it's a law enforcement issue, we put them in touch with someone in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office that can talk to them directly about that. If there's a crosswalk situation, we connect them directly with the Public Works Department to talk about how we can improve that. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we do is that connectivity. So there's really there's never a drag us in or anything else, because we're already actively involved with those groups and talking to them long before they get here, often 2 or 3 years before they get here, and addressing concerns they had. Because remember, you go on vacation or you go to a conference in another community to relax. And if you have concerns and issues before you get here, you're not going to relax when you get here. We feel very confident that people that come to Jacksonville start relaxing the moment they step on our soil.
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we are talking to Visit Jack's CEO, Michael Corrigan, about the tourist climate on the First Coast. And you can join our conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. So this is National Travel and Tourism Week. How many people visit Jacksonville each year, and what actually constitutes a visitor?
Well, in 2022 is the last year that we have accurate numbers on it, because they're still getting the numbers from 23, but 10.7 million overnight visitors came to Jacksonville. An overnight visitor is one half of the visitor population. The other half is day visitors, people that come into Jacksonville and visit and go back out. That's an additional 10 million visitors. So right around 21 million visitors came to Jacksonville last year. And that's just Jacksonville proper. That doesn't count the counties that surround Jacksonville. So it's an incredible number. I mean, if you look at the impact of that on our economy, 10% of the people that work in Jacksonville work in the hospitality industry. So
wow.
It's a massive economic impact, positive one.
So how does that number compare, in terms of the overall trajectory of Jacksonville tourism in recent years?
We're back. Everybody took a dip when the pandemic hit here, obviously, but we're back up to the numbers we had pre-pandemic, and those were the highest numbers we've ever had, and they continue to grow. And we continue to see people, industries and companies investing in tourism in Jacksonville, so we know that things are going to look up for the years to come.
Is there any other way to measure the impact of tourism on the economy other than just the number of people that work in a hospitality type role?
Well, I think there's a couple different ways. One is that you look at future investment, as I just mentioned. If investors and corporations are making additional investments, that sends us a positive note. The consistent occupancy of your properties, your hotel properties, is important, because then it says that you're not just a peak and valley. If you brought in a Super Bowl, for example, your numbers would obviously spike tremendously and go back down. In Jacksonville, the mixture between business travelers and just pure leisure travelers is one of our key points. We don't have a large theme park that bring people here at certain times of the year. We work very purposefully to make sure that we're bringing people in on a consistent basis. Yeah, sure, there's curves in the occupancy and the revenue side of it, but because of the community that we are, those numbers seem to stay fairly consistent compared to other communities.
Talk a little bit about Jacksonville's identity, because I know that there, it has traditionally been this sort of like, when they come here, what should they do here? And, the sense that the attractions are disparate, or, if you want to go to the zoo, it's a long way from the beach, it's a long way from downtown. And what is the material that kind of holds it together, its identity?
That's an interesting one, Ann. Our new advertising campaign is we're the flip side of Florida, because we're so different than the rest of the state of Florida, and we used to kind of hide from that, but now we totally embrace it and say, no, if you want a really unique, special Florida, come to Jacksonville. We talk a lot about the ease of getting it. Sure, things are sometimes 15, 20 minutes apart, but they're 15, 20 minutes apart unless you're trying to do it directly at rush hour in the morning or rush hour in the afternoon. You can get anywhere you want to get in Jacksonville in a half hour or less. We talk a lot about, especially to group tourism clients, getting off an airplane and coming to wherever you're going in Jacksonville. It's such an incredibly more positive experience than any other airport in the country. And we're selling that every single day, is that we're spread out. You're not going to be stacked on top of each other. You're not going to be just another number. One of the most unique things we have in tourism in Jacksonville is that every single tourist, every single visitor, it feels special because they're getting that individual service. So we see spread out and distance as a positive, not as a negative.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about some renovations that are apparently coming to our stadium here across the street. How is having a blackout on that stadium for a year or two during construction going to impact tourism in Jacksonville, and how are you preparing for that?
That's a great question. Visit Jacksonville has done a lot of research of what is that impact. Back when we were talking about 2 seasons of no football in the stadium, now we're talking about 1 season at reduced capacity, another season, 27 being gone. We estimate 125,000 room nights are connected with the stadium for every year it's there. That's a combination of the Jaguar seasons, obviously, the Florida-Georgia game, the Gator Bowl, and several concerts in the stadium. So we've already begun speaking to corporations here in town. There's a way for them to help us offset that loss, and by bringing conventions and conferences that they're involved with into town. You think about anything, the associations that you're involved with through your industry, how many times you've invited that industry to come to Jacksonville and host their conference here versus going to another community around the country. We're confident that a combination of partnering with the local companies and organizations and associations to bring conferences here during that 2-year period that they're going to have the biggest effect, we can make up that 125,000 room night loss by new business that comes in town. And then secondly, and we can talk about this more, we're really, Visit Jacksonville's partnering to help really ramp up sports tourism outside the stadium, all the other sports tourism, to make up the other half of that loss that we might have. So that combination establishes a new 125,000 room night revenue that's not here today. When the stadium reopens, we continue that momentum, and we've really raised tourism revenue in Duval County because the stadium got shut down instead of losing it because it got shut down.
Let's talk a little bit about sports tourism, because I know that's been a big initiative of yours and of the city recently, trying to be more of a attraction for large sporting events. How is that going, and why is that the chosen priority as opposed to any other niche that Jacksonville offers?
Well, Visit Jacksonville works with a whole lot of different entities all the time, and we realized we did our work that every time we brought in a major sports event, a major can be everything from a simple conference, any tournament or anything else, all the way up to obviously NCAA championships and Super Bowls and everything of that nature. What we realized was we have incredible infrastructure here available for us to market to the sports industry, and we really was not being done to the level that we think it could be done. Council President Ron Salem introduced legislation appropriating $1.5 million in tourist development tax to that effort. And part of that legislation, he encouraged a nonprofit 501c3 to be created to help promote and enhance and spread that economic opportunity out to the larger community. Recently, the Jacksonville Sports Foundation was established, that 501c that Council President had in his legislation. And we've been really quite pleasantly surprised at the number of opportunities that are available to us that we just, in the past, there wasn't a cohesive effort to be able to do that as a complete community, and now we feel like there is, and we see a lot of great explosion of growth of sports tourism. And sports tourism affects every area of the community. If the University of North Florida, for example, has a track championship on one of the best tracks in east side of the country, every hotel is positively impacted by that because of the number of athletes and family members that come in. It doesn't take an event in the stadium sold out in order to make a massive positive tourism impact. And those people that come in town enjoy our community. They eat in our restaurants. They shop in our stores. So everybody benefits from those types of events. This Jacksonville Sports Foundation is going to focus on bringing those types of events in every single week of the year to have a long-lasting positive impact.
I want to ask you a little bit about the bed tax because one of the parts of this stadium renovation deal is allocating somewhat more, I think, permanently the portions of the bed tax, the 6-cent bed tax that's levied for everybody who stays overnight in a hotel. You're also dependent on that money to promote and to, publicize this place and to bring in events. And are you at all concerned about having that bed tax, not available to you?
It's still going to be available to us. Real quick explanation for your listeners. There's a 6% bed tax that's charged on each night that someone stays in a hotel. The first third of that pays off the stadium bond issue. It has been for 30 years, and it will continue to do that. The second third is for maintenance in the sports complex area. And then the third is available to Visit Jacksonville or available for tourism promotions here in town. Visit Jacksonville's budget is 100% of that last third. Everything we do for visitors and residents and groups coming in is all free because of that tax that's coming in to pay for what we do. The stadium proposal, as I understand it today, does not affect the 2% available for tourism promotion that Visit Jacksonville receives at all. It only somewhat reflects that middle 2%. So currently the maintenance of the sports complex can go to any venue that's there, but under the proposal that's before the council now, the complete 2% would go towards maintaining the stadium because they've realized that the stadium hasn't been maintained to the level that needs to be in order for the stadium to last another 30 years. So there's no effect on the tourism promotion. There is some changes that will have to be made as far as maintenance of the facilities in the sports complex.
Are you hearing anything from those other facilities?
Not at this point.
Mm-hmm. And so it's a tight job market all over the place. And, service industry, hotel jobs, those can get pinched. How is the market for jobs affecting the workforce and finding people to work those jobs when visitors are coming to town?
That's been the biggest challenge as the tourism economy recovered in Jacksonville. One of the biggest challenges we had was finding enough workforce to be able to do that. Having the opportunity to come talk to you on venues like this where we can talk about the positives of tourism encourages more people to get into the industry. We're seeing a recovery, but like most industries, it's not an overnight recovery. It's a longer recovery. It's caused our industry partners to look at how they can do things differently with less people, and that's affected mostly on the number. Do you clean a room every single day, or do you clean a room at a hotel every other day? Do you continue to have breakfast in the morning at a hotel, or do you have to end that because you don't have the people to do it? The industry nationwide has made changes to those policies in order to adjust for the reduced availability of workforce. We're seeing it changing back to normal because we continue, not just in Jacksonville but around the country, and the tourism pros are all saying this is a phenomenal industry. You should come work in this industry, and that message is being received, and we're starting to see some workforce recovery because of that.
If there was one thing that you could, pick for this city, either to focus on or a funding, item that you could fund, or what would be the top of your wish list if you could just sort of have it your way, Michael Corrigan?
Wow. Well, we could always use more funding to market Jacksonville around the country. We've seen and we have proof through our marketing research that when we get the word out about Jacksonville, it brings people to Jacksonville. And if we could do that better, more people would come in and increase the revenue for the local businesses that count on tourism, and then obviously the city as a whole, because we'd bring in revenue to our city.
So money.
More money to be able to market Jacksonville around the world.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you wish that the city would change about the way that it does its own business, or the things that it prioritizes that you would like to see that would help the city become more marketable in and of itself?
I don't think so. I would tell you that Visit Jacksonville and the city of Jacksonville had an incredible relationship, and that we don't do anything without talking to the city about how we think it'll positively affect them, and the city talks to us on a regular basis about how what they do affect tourists in town. I think I mentioned this earlier. The number one thing that sets Jacksonville apart is that this mentality that we're all in it together. Everybody wants to help Jacksonville continue to be the city that we love. You talk to almost every single person, and they weren't born here. They moved here. They came here for some reason. It often starts with just a visit, and then they moved here because they love it so much. I've talked to everything from athletes to CEOs that have said, I didn't plan on staying in Jacksonville, but I don't know what it is about that place, but it really is unique. And that's what Visit Jacksonville has an opportunity to sell every day, that really unique experience that you can have when you come visit in Jacksonville. I mean, we obviously partner with Chamber of Commerce, and I tell them, every business that's going to move here starts with a visit.
We've got a call. Eric in Arlington. Eric, good morning. Go ahead.
Yeah, the St. John's River is what sets Jacksonville apart. Without the St. John's River, this is sort of nowheresville. And that river has a lot of history, including the very first the French settlement in the 1560s, the very first battle between colonial powers in North America happened right here in what is now Jacksonville, right there along the river. So, I don't know if a museum would be in order or what, but I think that everybody could be proud of something that, a campaign that highlighted the river and made the river the destination rather than, worrying about football or whatever else. I think the river should be the focus point. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Well, we've got the River Keeper coming on here in just a moment, and I'm sure that she would love to have, more attention placed. Is that something that you market when you're talking about Jacksonville?
Yeah, absolutely. Jacksonville has 1,500 miles of shoreline, more than any other community in the state, and we market that every single day. If you look at marketing materials that we use on a regular basis, almost every single one of them has water. Most of them are river related. We use a shot of downtown constantly in our media. He's right. I mean, the river is an incredible asset. I was at a conference and somebody said, what would you tell any visitor that came to Jacksonville? I said, touch the water. Touch the water. And touch the water could obviously be the river. Get on it somehow. Get on a water taxi. Somehow get on the river and see it. Go to the beach and touch the surf, or even go to a swimming pool and touch the water. If you want to have an incredible experience in Jacksonville and understand the power of the St. Johns River, just take 15 minutes and walk across the Main Street Bridge, the Blue Bridge downtown, or even the Fuller-Warren on 995. The power and beauty of that river is one of the things we sell on a regular basis.
Well, Michael Corrigan, thank you so much for coming on this morning. Appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Up next, a river expedition to measures of river health is often invisible on the surface, but river grass is the focus of an upcoming river expedition. And here to talk about it, I'm joined by St. John's River Keeper, Lisa Reineman. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you back. So we hear about river grasses often in regards to manatees, which feed off of them and has caused stress and even starvation. But what is the role of river grasses overall?
Sure. So our river grasses, they're the kidneys of the river. And so they're very important biofilters to filter out pollution, but they're also critical habitat not only for manatees, but also all of our recreational and commercial fisheries. Our seafood industry, the foundation, are these river grasses. So they're extremely important to river health, but also our economy.
And so you are tracking the health of these river grasses, and they're not doing real well right now.
They are not. We've been tracking the decline of river grasses, or SAV, submerged aquatic vegetation, for over, the last decade, and really been concerned initially about saltwater intrusion. We're seeing grasses disappear in Duval County and as far south as North St. Johns and Clay County. But after Hurricane Irma, there was actually devastation of river grasses for over 100 miles in the St. Johns, and those grasses haven't come back as well as they should. And so it really opened up our eyes to there's multiple stressors to the important ecological features of our river.
I want to talk more about saltwater intrusion in a minute, but I had seen some numbers about Irma. It said that the St. John's typically flows, 2 to 11 billion gallons a day, kind of depending on various factors. But during Irma, that hit 88 billion. And I didn't realize that river flow can actually kind of just scour the river bottom and those grasses.
Absolutely. When you have that much force going through the river, it can devastate the grasses and have that short-term impact. But what we also saw after Irma is water levels were higher for a longer period of time, and the water was darker due to all of this tannins and stuff coming in, sediments coming out of the swamps. And so that higher, darker water blocked sunlight from getting down to the river bottom that could have helped bring these grasses back.
Interesting. And then I would guess there was a lot of pollution that happened during that storm. All of those places that flooded, all that went somewhere.
Absolutely. And then also we had storms Ian and Nicole. While we were not hit as much as we could have been in Central Florida, they were devastated. And you had millions of gallons of raw sewage dumped in the river, and that increases nutrient pollution, increases toxic blue-green algae, what also blocks out light from getting down to these critical grasses.
Saltwater intrusion is something that we're seeing in a lot of places in Florida right now, partly because of rising sea levels and the way that that water can kind of force its way up into our systems. But talk about what happened with the dredging of the St. Johns River for the port.
Sure. When you dredge the river, you go deeper, wider. We've straightened the river. We've taken out sandbars. All of those are natural protections for too much of the Atlantic Ocean coming too far inland. And when you take all that out, when you create a superhighway for larger ships, you also create a superhighway for the Atlantic Ocean to push with more tidal force, more salt water into the St. Johns River further and further upstream. In fact, the tide range for the St. Johns has more than doubled since we've been dredging the river for more than 100 years to accommodate the port. They can coexist, but we have to make sure we're understanding what those upstream impacts are from our downstream actions.
So there are some solutions that have been proposed for the salinity issue, and one of those would be releasing the Ocklawaha River.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Explain how that flows and kind of what that would do.
Sure. If you reunite Silver Springs, the Ocklawaha, and the St. Johns River, that will basically restore the natural flow of spring water coming from Silver Springs and release more than 20 springs that are drowned out due to the dam and the pool. And that'll restore 150 million gallons every single day of fresh, clear, cooler water to the St. Johns River system, which will help offset the saltwater intrusion and also provide more fresh water to help these struggling grasses.
And the Ocklawaha was dammed, and then the kind of that channel was dredged. Initially, there was going to be a barge canal that was built.
That's right. They were going to build a barge canal across the peninsula of Florida, just like the Panama Canal. Luckily, that was stopped by President Nixon in 1972. But the dam remains in place, and every day it's basically like a tourniquet on the Ocklawaha River. It's hurting the St. Johns River and Silver Springs, and so restoration will help 4 different ecosystems, and why we continue to try to reunite the rivers.
But there still remains a fair amount of opposition to that.
You know, it's changing. We've been working diligently with more than 60 organizations on a regional solution to really change the conversation from what will be lost to what will be gained. And we're very hopeful. We're seeing more and more people realize that there's beneficial opportunities, both environmentally but also economically, with more ecotourism restoration and helping restore the St. Johns River as the bass fishing capital of the world.
Got a call from our friend Stanley. Good morning, Stanley. Go ahead.
Yes, and you're doing a fantastic job, too. Yes, when it comes to the river there, why are we not doing marketing to the regular citizen and educate them on the river? And also my main question is my main comment is access to the river. Because John and I, we go down the river. I'm saying we're not walking down the side. We go down in a kayak. So we're a little more knowledgeable about what's going on in the river. But when it comes talking to people in the leadership, they're not interested in the private citizen concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Stanley. You know, Lisa, I remember former Mayor John Delaney talking about what a transformative experience it was for him personally to go and explore the river and see it in a way that he hadn't seen it before, you know, from a friend who took him boating. And that really was the root of, you know, an enormous preservation project that he undertook.
Absolutely. The best place to talk about the river is getting out on the river. And Stanley's right. We need to have more access. We need to have more opportunities to get out on the river. We've been working on the Ribault River with part of the Resilient Ribault Project with LISC Jacksonville. It's sort of a mini project for Resilient Jacksonville, but really focusing on getting community leaders out on the river and getting elected officials on the river to help not only provide more access and provide more enhancement to local parks that are on the waterfront, but also what can we do to protect the communities and make the rivers healthier, as well as all the communities that depend on our healthy waterways. So Stanley's absolutely right. We need more access.
I want to ask you about this idea of fencing some grasses, because I was fascinated to learn that while we think of manatees as requiring this grass to survive, they're also a threat to this grass. And in some cases, the state has created kind of barriers so that they can't get to it.
Yeah, and I hate to say they're a threat, but they're also part of the equation. I mean, with the grasses have multiple stressors, and what we're finding out when you have saltwater intrusion, when you have higher, darker water, you have too many nutrients and algal blooms, all of these stresses are stunting the river's grasses growth. And so they're succumbing to grazing pressure. And it's not just manatees, it's also turtles. You have invasive tilapia pulling up the grasses from the root. And so what we're looking at is the grasses are just, if you go out there, you can find them, but if they're not protected from the grazers, it looks like a lawnmower has just gone over the top of them. They're only about 2 inches tall. And so what we're looking at is trying to fence off sections along an 80-mile stretch of the river so the grasses can come back, they can thrive, they can grow tall enough that they can spread, and they need enough energy to do the spreading so we can have more habitat, more food sources for manatees and turtles. And we're working very closely with our manatee experts, both in the agencies as well as organizations like Save the Manatee, to make sure this is a long-term strategy to help provide more grasses and food sources for manatees.
And so is that a fairly new initiative, the fencing of these areas, and what results have been seen so far?
Yeah, so FWC, Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, they started doing this a couple years ago, and we've been tracking it. And several of our sites have an existing fence so far, and one in particular in Dancy Point at East Palatka, the river grasses outside the fence, they were struggling to get, never even got it 3 inches tall over our tour last year. We went and measured these sites over a 6-month period. When we came back at the end of the year, inside the fences, the grasses were more than 100 centimeters. They went all the way up your arm. So it's definitely helping, but it's only part of the solution. We have to reduce stress and also provide grasses enough energy so they can spread.
So there's an invasive species you mentioned called blue tilapia, which has become a real problem when it comes to these grasses. I guess not so much because they eat them, but because they burrow in them?
They do a little bit of both. There have been studies where they find these eelgrass or river grasses in the stomachs of tilapia, but they definitely, they build like spawning pits, and that's how the males, they mark their territory. And so they actually go and disturb the river bottom. They pull out the grasses by the roots, and that creates more sedimentation. There's more dirt stirred up in the river that blocks sunlight. And so it's just a domino effect. And we're seeing these invasive fish thrive throughout the St. Johns River system and then up into Silver Springs. It's a real problem.
And like a lot of invasive species, it's sort of introduced because it seemed like a good idea at the time?
Yes, it was introduced for weed control, basically floating vegetation, as well as they were farmed in some areas. And so because they are a popular food source, now the Water Management District and the agencies are actually hiring fishermen to come and harvest these tilapia because it actually not only reduces the risk to our river grasses, it takes out nutrients of the system, but the fishermen are struggling to keep up because the numbers are thriving in the warmer waters of the St. Johns.
And I was shocked to see how much of the population of Silver Spring they now make up, those invasive tilapia.
Oh, it's mind-blowing. Same in the upper St. Johns. There was a study recently, and it was more than 90% invasive fish. And so when you have invasive fish coming into your system, there's unintended consequences like we're talking about with the grasses, but they also can thrive in areas and actually grow better than our native fish. And so it's negative to our native fish populations that need their habitat. And so it's just a really, really challenging situation we find ourselves in.
It's astonishing to think that that would be 90% of the population of fish in the...
And it was tilapia as well as armored catfish and other invasives. So it's really a problematic state. And if we don't get our river back in a balance, it allows these invasive species to thrive where our native fish population is not doing so well because they need this habitat. They need a perfect balance of salt and fresh water. They need fresh water. And so we need to get our river back in balance to help the grasses, which will in turn help our native fish population like American shad, American eel, largemouth bass, striped bass, and others.
So let's talk about this expedition that's coming up. The Riverkeeper does this each year. What is it, and what's the goal?
Sure. So the goal is to find out as much information about these grasses that we can and also get water quality information at each site. We do this by going to nearly 15 sites over an 80-mile stretch of the St. Johns over a 4-day period. And so we'll leave on Tuesday, May 28th, and we'll start in Doctor's Lake. And we go to house, we visit by dock. And so the added benefit of this tour is we stop at people's homes. We meet with them on their river. We sit there every single time. We go to the same location, and we take water quality measurements. We get into the river. We look for grasses. When we find them, we measure them in density and canopy height. And then we go back and do that for 2 additional times this year so we can look at how the grasses are doing in Doctor's Lake, how they're doing in Fruit Cove, Palatka, Willaca, Lake George, and compare all of that data with not only what we collect, but also all of the river enthusiasts' observations. We meet with scientists, we meet with bass fishermen to really bring it all together to see what's going on and figure out what we can collectively do about it to save our river's grasses.
Sometimes you encounter pollution that actually prevents you from being able to do what you need to do, though.
Absolutely. We're already having reports of blue-green algae outbreaks that can be toxic. Last year, we had to not get into the water in several sites. And so if we run into something that looks like it's a problem, we'll take water samples to see if toxins are present. And then we can also share that with all the river enthusiasts in the area so they won't put themselves in harm's way.
And so what do you want to see if people want to get involved, what they can do?
Sure, absolutely. So they can go to our website at stjohnsriverkeeper.org. We'll be publishing our findings and reports every day. And there's simple things people can do every day to reduce their nutrient pollution footprint by using no fertilizer. It's the summertime, it's raining a lot. If you reduce your own nutrient pollution footprint, that helps the river. But then also work with us to advocate for policies as well as projects like reuniting the rivers that will help save our St. Johns River.
Well, Lisa Reineman, Riverkeeper, thank you so much for coming on the program today, and have a good expedition.
Absolutely. Look forward to telling everyone about it when we return.
Okay. We'll look forward to it, too. Up next, spreading the message of mental health on the streets. I'm joined now by Cheryl Johnson. She's founder and president of Hearts for Minds, which is a nonprofit focused on preventing suicide. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Cheryl, we posted a picture of your son, Alex, on our website today. If you want to see it, they can go to it and see. It's an adorable picture. It was taken when he was 5. Tell us about that picture and how it's come to symbolize the work that you're doing.
Sure. So Alex passed away on August 12th, 2017. He'd been battling depression and anxiety, diagnosed in high school, but went off to college. We thought he was in a good place. And in the second semester of his junior year, started struggling again. And our journey to help him over the next year and a half was difficult. A friend gave him what he thought was Xanax. It was laced with fentanyl, and he died. We spent the year after losing him trying to figure out what we wanted to do. It doesn't matter how you lose a child. I think a lot of people feel compelled to do something when you feel like a life has been lost too early. But we wanted to do something impactful and decided to focus on what could have been better for us as a family. We felt left out of his care and uneducated about what he was going through, and so helpless to figure out how to support and help him. And so a year after losing him, we decided to start our foundation, Hearts for Minds. You can find more information on it on our website, heartsforminds.org, and mostly focusing on a few things. One, just unapologetic conversations and destigmatization. What Alex was going through was not a definition of who he was. And educating and supporting families, just feeling like someone should not go through that journey on their own, and then helping to connect people to information and resources in an easier way, because it's hard to have conversations about mental illness. We used that picture to remember him. He was this great, sweet guy, always from the time he was born, and a dragonfly landed on his face. He thought it was fantastic. So what started out as our way to remember his spirit became our symbol of hope, courage, and change.
And I see you're wearing a dragonfly pin today.
Always people can get them if they want to help support. They're on our website. They're in the mental health colors of green, but they're a great reminder of courage, hope, and change that people do have the ability.
He had a diagnosis of epilepsy when he was 16 or so. Did that weigh in at all on what happened to him later?
He was diagnosed with the mental health issues first. He had a seizure for the first time when he was home from school visiting, and never had another one. So we think it complicated some of the medication that he could take and managing it, but it was just a one-time thing, which I understand can happen. But it also enhanced his mental health struggles. He couldn't do some of the things that he wanted to for a while, and that caused him to fall into a deeper depression.
Do you think we're getting better, our conversations around mental health and, getting rid of some of that stigma?
I think we're talking about it more frequently. I think our teens and young adults are willing to talk about it more, but I think we still have a ways to go in solving the problems. My husband always says talking about it is good, but sometimes it becomes admiring the problem. So we have to put solutions in place that help access to care and the education piece.
So this event that's coming up, this Chalk It Up, is an event that's designed to kind of get that conversation started or to maybe speak more to adults. Tell us about that.
It's a little bit of everything. Everything we do, we try and focus on easy ways to have conversations. So Chalk It Up for Life is for the whole month of May. The idea was to use positive affirmations and positive messages to start to encourage empathy. Empathy is shown to bridge gaps between people because it establishes a connection. And it also, if you're kind to someone, it elicits a positive response in yourself, and you never know what it's going to do for someone else. So the idea is to get a piece of chalk, write a random positive message on a sidewalk, in a driveway, in a roadway. Don't be safe when you do it, and don't vandalize anything. It's just chalk. And if you can, post it and tag us, Hearts for Minds, in the post so that we can just flood the social media with all of these positive messages. You never know what it's going to mean to someone who comes across it.
Yeah, and it looked like there were some really adorable drawings that were out there already, including a bunch with dragonflies in them.
Yeah, we love when people add the dragonfly to it. It helps to reinforce the concept of the visual imagery, but any positive messages are great.
So recently, the city of Jacksonville rolled out kind of a new initiative trying to steer people to resources and also adding a couple of staff members to the United Way's crisis hotline, which has seen a huge increase in calls since it was established, that 988 number. So that, I would guess, be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, we work with the city on a variety of different ways to help connect people to resources. We're in discussions with them. People should keep in touch with our social media and our website. We're about to launch an interactive platform that'll help better connect people to targeted resources depending on what they're dealing with. So we're super excited about that. And we're making progress. The city has definitely focused attention on mental health issues in the community.
What's your Instagram?
It's at Hearts4Minds.
And that's where we'll be seeing the Chalk It Up.
And Facebook,
pictures.
yes.
And Facebook.
Yes.
All right. Well, Cheryl Johnson, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about it. We appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. Look forward to everybody chalking up some messages.
All right.
And providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, answering who, what, when, where, why, and how is critical to proving the truth. More at terrellhogan.com.
David Otter is a labor economist. His research has shown that in the past, technological advances have repeatedly hurt the incomes of middle and working class Americans. But when it comes to AI, Otter says the exact opposite could happen.
What we've seen in the sort of customer support setting is that it used to take 10 months to reach a really expert level, and now using this tool, they get there in 3 months.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
I'm Scott Tong. The new National Teacher of the Year, Missy Testerman, joins us to talk education in her state of Tennessee and the country.
I think that you'd be hard-pressed to find a teacher in America who does not point to mental health of students as the most pressing issue right now.
That's next time and Here and Now.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
Whether it's a technological threat or a physical one, authorities are ringing alarm bells. From the potential dangers of AI-generated disinformation to the presence of armed election monitors, the security of the election is at stake in 2024. Next time on 1A, how are election officials preparing? And what's being done to make sure that democracy can function without fear or threat?
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And to talk about it, we are joined by WJCT reporter and lifelong car fan, Dan Scanlon.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dan. It's nice to have you.
It's nice to be here.
So I want to talk to you about something that's been in the news lately, and we actually covered on our reporter roundtable recently, is the issue of this automated vehicle, this autonomous vehicle program that JTA is creating along Bay Street. Now looking like, at least initially, that promise of those vehicles being autonomous maybe isn't going to happen.
Well, autonomous, yes, but they're not going to be the cubes that are currently being tested and have been tested. They're going to actually use modified Ford vans, and they will have an attendant, quote unquote, at the driver's seat to answer questions because people will be curious, and also just in case. But these systems are well tested. They use laser, they use radar, they use cameras. That said, there have been lawsuits, there have been issues, and there's even the pranksters who put traffic cones on the hoods of these things, and then the poor AIs don't know what to do, and they just sit in the middle of an intersection.
This program, though, seems quite over budget at this point and fairly well behind schedule. They asked for an extension from the federal government to 2030, and the federal government said no. And so they basically have to get this, up and running in order to collect all the big grants that they're counting on.
They had a town hall meeting at the library last week, and they told me and everybody that June 2025, this thing will be running up and down Bay Street from basically the TU Center area down to where we are here in the stadium with the loop around ViStar. And there'll be 14 vehicles, there'll be 12 stops, there'll be some pullouts probably at the marina / Four Seasons Hotel, etc., so that you can actually get in and out without blocking traffic. And they say these are standard Ford Aerostar vans, so 12 people per. So it will make some impact if you want to party down here and then go hit the elbow for a drink and not want to drive.
All right. It doesn't help, I guess, that this is the inheritor of the Skyway system, essentially. This is sort of like next generation, the ultimate urban circulator, UTC.
Yeah, and I remember the
U2C.
Skyway, the UTC. The Skyway was promised to be the traffic solver, and almost nobody rides it. But Section 2, Phase 2, will be to put ramps from Bay Street up onto the ramp, the overhead, and then probably that's when the boxes, the automated people shuttles that we're familiar with will go, and those will go to San Marco and all the way to the La Villa bus hub. And then Phase 3, no date for that, no date for Phase 3, would be to spread it into Riverside, etc. I'm just dying to see how well it works. Again, people are going to be freaked out with an autonomous vehicle the size of a Ford van. And on board, they're interesting. I've driven many an autonomous vehicle, or should I say I've been driven by, and they have occasional glitches when they turn off.
Mm-hmm. And so there have been some problems, as you alluded to. There have been a couple of lawsuits against General Motors.
Well, General Motors self-driving company called Cruise just settled a major lawsuit in San Francisco where a person was hit by another vehicle and then pushed into the path of one of their vehicles and basically was hit by that vehicle. And in the process, the Cruise system was stopped in San Francisco. But Waymo, W-A-Y-M-O, also does autonomous vehicles, and they were allowed to continue. That said, now NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Group, is investigating some issues with the autonomous system in Waymo's. So that's an issue. And then, the tariffs that the president is now proposing could affect Waymo and other electric car companies. The batteries are a lot of times sourced, but the vehicles that Waymo is planning to use are Chinese vehicles. And with a 125% tariff, that may be off the board. You may have to find a domestic manufacturer for those.
I mean, the tariff issue and the concerns about vehicles being imported from China that maybe have some disruptive technology, that's all being discussed, but obviously going to have an impact on efforts to move to green energy.
Correct, because now we have an issue with the batteries that are supplying the green energy, the EVs, and then the computer systems, which obviously the president doesn't want here, hence the battle with a certain TikTok.
Yes, and so that is happening. There's also this issue with the Malibu. Have a little moment of silence for it. So Chevy's phasing it out?
Ken and Barbie will not be happy. Their Malibu is gone. The Malibu, which has been a sedan, popular sedan, a lot of fleet sedan for many years, is going to end production. That will be in November, the last passenger vehicle sold by GM, other than the Cadillac sedans that are out there and the Corvette, and even the Corvette now is going hybrid.
Wait, what do you mean by passenger vehicle?
Everything else is now a crossover or an SUV.
Okay.
Take a look at what our sheriff's office is using. Take a look at what any utility is using. Their fleet vehicles are Chevy SUVs and crossovers on up to the Escalade and the big Cadillac.
So basically, no more sedans.
No more sedans other than a few Japanese. The Chryslers are gone. Ford has ceased all sedans. There's hardly any low four-door with trunk anywhere sold.
Well, farewell, Malibu.
We'll hit the beach in a crossover.
All right. Dan Scanlon, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
And that's our program. We encourage your feedback and suggestions, and you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. If you missed anything today, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive at WJCT.org.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at